Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How are you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I'm doing the next video in my palette roulette series in which I pick a palette that's in my collection that might also be in your collection. I utilize it for a couple weeks and then I come back to you and I talk to you about my experiences with the palette. I show you some live swatches, pictures of the looks I was able to create, and then we pull another palette. I sure hope that sounds like something that you're interested in. Today we have a couple of what I would consider drugstore brands to go over, and I'm super excited to share my thoughts and opinions with y'all. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here on my platform, but ultimately I'm just out here because I like to talk about makeup. And I'm assuming you like to talk about makeup too, and that is why you're here. So hopefully you'll find that this channel brings solace to your soul in the way it brings solace to mine, and you'll want to subscribe before you go. And with that said, let's roll into this palette roulette in which I will be reviewing the Juvias Place Garden of Juvias and the WINKY LUX Galaxy Kitten palette today. Alright, so today we have two palettes that I would deem more on the drugstore side, although this one is quite expensive for a 9-pan palette. But we have the Juvias Place Garden of Juvias palette, and we have the WINKY LUX Galaxy Kitten palette. And I did pick this up because I do have two other palettes by WINKY LUX that I really enjoy. As a matter of fact, one of them is one of my favorite palettes. I think I mentioned it in my top 3 palettes from every category video that went up last week. I'll link that in the cards for you, but it is just the WINKY LUX Kitten palette. So the first one I ever tried by them. I love that palette. The other one that I have is the Mermaid Kitten, I believe. It's not wholeheartedly my favorite, but it does have some really great shades in it, and then I picked this one up last year. This one is by Juvias Place, and Juvias Place is one of my favorite brands from the drugstore realm. I do have a video here on my channel ranking all the Juvias Place palettes that I have. I do think that this is the first one that I've picked up in a very long time, and this one launched in the summer of last year. I think I picked these up around the same time frame, so there's that. Those are the two palettes that we're going to go over today. These days have been coming at you with a couple of palettes, if not more, and I utilize them for a couple weeks so that I get a good grasp on each one of the palettes, not just a good grasp on one of the palettes, and have a good amount of eye looks to show you. But then when I review them, I go through each one of them separately. But I do talk about how they worked with each other. So the first one I'm going to go over today is this one. This is the WINKY LUX Kitten palette. It is a $25 eyeshadow palette. It has 0.475 ounces of product in it, or 0.053 ounces per pan. It is cruelty-free, gluten-free, and vegan. It is considered clean beauty at Target. I am not 100% on what stipulations fall into clean beauty at Target, but it is considered that, and it does have a 12-month shelf life. The front of the palette looks like this. It's just a really beautiful kind of like purpley, blue, mint green, like galaxy oriented thought process. It has little cats and UFOs on it, and then the background though is more floral, which it looks like thistles. You know those flowers that I think they're called thistles, or honey thistles, honeysuckles or something. That's what that reminds me of. And then maybe hyacinth. I don't know my flowers. I just know that the background is very floral, and then it's got cats with UFOs on it. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my humble opinion. The back of the palette looks like this. It does have the shades of the palette listed there on the outside of the palette. So even if this was packaged in a way that you couldn't open it up and see what was inside the palette, you could see it here. It's just got some information about the palette, the shelf life, the, gluten-free, cruelty-free status is on here as well, and then it has some information about the company on it. And then when you open it up, it does have a decent size mirror, not too big, not too small, and this is the color story of the palette. So this does have 9 shades with 3 finishes. There's matte, satin, and shimmer finishes in here. It has a 4.8 star rating at Target with 32 reviews, a 4.4 star on Google with 29 reviews, and a 4.6 star rating on WINKY LUX with 23 reviews. And it is a galaxy inspired smoky eye palette. As you guys can see, it's very gray, black, and smoky in appearance. It's a very monotone eyeshadow palette. It reminds me a lot of ColourPop Baroque in the color story, and as you guys know, I did do a ranking all the palettes I used last year, and Baroque actually showed up on like my top 10 eyeshadow palettes. It was a surprise hit for me because I've not got a whole lot of ColourPop in my collection, honestly. I think I have 3 palettes from ColourPop, and to have a ColourPop eyeshadow palette show up on the top was kind of crazy, in my humble opinion, just knowing me and knowing my palettes and my palette choices and my aesthetics and beauty. The company boasts this as a velvety and high pigment formula, and I do believe that it is velvety. Even to the touch, the shades in this palette are really very soft and silky feeling. But I do not for 1 second believe this to be a high pigment formula. There is a couple shades in here that do have a little bit more pigment than others. I would say this one is one of them. This one is another one. But other than that, like, every shadow in this palette kind of needed to be built and then built and then built again, because whether it had the pigment or not, as you blended it, the pigmentation just kind of blended away. This works best with a primer for both performance and longevity reasons. You must pat on and layer the shades on your eyes to get the look that you want from the shades, and sometimes that pat and place mindset was all you could do with these shadows, because as I said, if you blended them at all, they would just kind of blend away. This palette also does not play nicely with other palettes. I know that I used it quite often to deepen up the eye looks in this palette, as I am doing today, and it created voids when you patted it on top of, I guess it doesn't even work well with itself, because when you patted it to create pigmentation on top of itself or on top of another palette, it almost erased all of the color underneath it and didn't really stick anywhere on the eye. I felt like I was consistently trying to approach this with delicacy because it is a dark eyeshadow palette, but also needing to put like 12 or 14 or 18 layers on top of one another in order to get any kind of pigmentation. And then as soon as I went to blend it out, it created patchiness and voiding. So I would place the eyeshadow again on my eyes, and even if I just left it there, it would create the patchiness and voiding just by me opening and closing my eyes. I really wasn't pleased with this palette, if I'm honest. It was impossible to build up the shadows. It just didn't want to stick around. It just didn't want to stay on my eyes. And this is not the experience that I have with WINKY LUX overall. As I said, one of the palettes that I have by WINKY LUX is one of my favorite palettes. So I was a little taken aback. The wear time on this palette is anywhere from 0 hours, because as I said, if you tried to pat it on or blend it out, it would just go away or create voiding. So anywhere from 0 hours at worst to 3 hours at best. I really didn't find it to have any kind of longevity whatsoever. Even using a glitter glue, because I had to go in with glitter glue on almost every single one of my eye looks this week. So I did try it with this palette as well, and even using a glitter glue, it just wasn't fantastic. It just didn't want to stick around. It just didn't want to stick around, and it does not want to play. With that said, this is going to be a palette that I actually declutter today, because it's too similar to the Baroque palette. It's almost identical to the Baroque palette, and I also just recently purchased the ColourPop Stone Cold Fox, which I feel like has all of these colors in it as well. And this one was just, it's not my vibe. There are a couple of eyeshadows in here that I really did love, this one being one of them, this one being another one of them, which is weird because it's a black with glitter in it, but it performs very much like a shimmery black than it does a black matte with glitter in it. So I did like those two shades, but all the other ones in here were just really super powdery. Didn't want to work with anything that I tried to do with it. Even this cream one was not super great. It leaned kind of pink more than it did beige, and it really just didn't mesh well with all the everything else, and it was so chalky and powdery that it just wasn't worth wearing. It exacerbated every amount of texture on my eye when I did place it on my eye look. I had it on my lid space in one eye look, and I had it up in my brow bone area in another eye look. It just created texture where I don't believe there was texture. On my lid, sure, there's texture, but I didn't do anything to help that texture out. So I will be getting rid of this palette today, but before I do that, let me go ahead and swatch these shades for you. And I think that you will see that they are beautiful, and they, as far as like getting onto an area, like utilizing your finger to place the shadows, really does work well. They are so soft, but I think the softness of them might be lending to what isn't working for this palette. So the first shade in this palette is this one called Milky Way. Again, this is the matte cream shadow. It is very chalky when using it, even though it feels so creamy and buttery to the touch. Then there is Stardust. Stardust is a silvery white pearl, and it is beautiful, but it almost goes on like a topper. So no pigmentation to it whatsoever. As you turn your hand, it kind of disappears, and you guys can see that. So it does that on the eye too. It just kind of looks like blank space on an eye look. It also, I feel like, is more creamy than the other shadows in here, which kind of lends to it being a little bit more wet maybe, and it doesn't blend as well as some of the other shadows. And then we have this one, which, as you can see, didn't even swatch, so I'm gonna try that again. There we go. That one is called Cosmic, and it is a very light taupey gray tone. And then we have Aristocat. Aristocat is patchy at best, and it is a matte ash gray. And then we have Galactic, which is actually a really beautiful shimmer taupe shade. I really did enjoy this shadow. It's a very pretty shimmer taupe. Probably my favorite in the palette is this one here, and that one is called Stellar. It's technically slated as a cool brown satin, but I felt like it played very well on the like purple end of the spectrum. It is so pretty, like almost eggplanty. And then we have Meowter Space, which is a shimmer pewter shade, and really pretty. I think that you guys can see that. And then we have Eclipse, which was the matte black. Again, patchy at best, really horrible black. And this one was the worst for picking up color underneath it. And then we have Retrograde, which is the shimmer black. And when I wanted a black in my eye look, if I did not use this black, then I was in a world of hurts, because the other black, the black matte, just liked to pick up the other shadows. Whereas this one didn't pick it up as much, but it was also glittery. The great thing about this black is that that glitter does show up. If you wet your brush or put it over the top of a tacky base, the glitter does show up. So it's not like you have two matte blacks in the palette, which I was worried about. I would say that the glitter doesn't necessarily show up. It just looks shiny. So not a matte black is what it looks like, but not a shimmer, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So those are those shades, and I really think that, you know, it's a shame that this didn't work very well, because I think that this color story is gorgeous. And I am not a huge like cool tone eyeshadow guru. Like, it's been a long time coming for this to be something that I enjoy dabbling in, but here lately I really do enjoy a really beautiful cool tone eye look on my eyes. It kind of makes me feel like a boss and I really do enjoy that, but I have better palettes in my collection that'll do that for me than this one, so this one will be going. I would probably rank this in the like 3.8 star if I was going to rank it. I don't quite understand how it got a 4.8. I do understand how it got a 4.4, but the more we go up, the worse it is. There are some great shadows in here, like I said, but for the most part, it's just kind of a not great palette. So that one will be leaving my collection today. The next palette is this one, and this is the Juvia's Place Garden of Juvia's eyeshadow palette, and it looks, I've got this crazy ass neighbor's dog. Can you guys hear that dog? It's my neighbor, like catty corner across the street from me. I don't understand how we can hear his dog, right? This is the Juvia's Place Garden of Juvia's palette. I'm always just astounded and in awe of the artwork on a Juvia's Place palette. Juvia's Place is a Black-owned makeup brand. It is cruelty-free and it is vegan. It's not unknown to the drama on the beauty space. There is a lot of controversy that goes on with this brand, but Juvia's Place has been one of my favorite drugstore brands for as long as I can remember pre-controversy. The most recent controversy was in summer of 2022, if I remember correctly. It's a brand that a lot of people have canceled here on the platform. I have to be honest with you, I'm here for the makeup. I'm not here for the controversies. There's very few brands that I know of for me that I absolutely won't buy anything from. Juvia's Place isn't one of them, but this is the first palette that I bought from Juvia's Place in a very, very long time. This palette is $25 and it has this beautiful artwork on the front. The back just looks like this, and it has, you know, a variegated pastel cardboard packaging with a bunch of words in a very light pink on the back of this. And if you are hard of vision, like myself, this is very hard to see. Down at the bottom here, it does tell you that it's cruelty-free and vegan, and it does tell you that it's got a 24-month shelf life on it. This is what the palette looks like on the inside. So again, the same artwork that is on the front of the palette exists on the inside of the palette, and then the palette shadows look like this. It is definitely, obviously, a pastel eyeshadow palette, and this launched in summer of 2022. I don't know about you, but to me, it looks more like an Easter or springtime palette, but whatevs. It does come in at 4.7 stars on Google with 123 reviews and 4.5 stars on Ulta with 54 reviews, and it is inspired by springtime florals, but it came out in summer. The mattes in here are not the same Juvia's Place formula that I think that I remember or am used to. The mattes in here are very dry and they're not super pigmented at all. I feel like you have to pack them on and pack them on and pack them on again. The yellow in my eye look today is this yellow, and the orange is this one here. And I feel like I had to put this yellow on my eye like 8 times to get it to show up at all. And with that said, again, I go back to Juvia's Place is a Black-owned makeup brand. Their mantra is that they make makeup to suit Black skin. I don't think that any of these shades are going to show up well on people of color, especially when I struggled with them showing up on my skin, and I am a ghost. I had a really hard time getting any of the mattes here to show up even to pan color on my eye look. So anything beyond that, any kind of building that you do beyond that is, you know, going to help, but it's not going to get it to pan. I don't even think that this yellow looks to pan in my eye look, or this like corally orange looks to pan in my eye look right now. And I know for a fact, at least 8 layers, because I got to 8 layers and then was like, I'm not counting anymore. I think that the mattes in this palette could have been much better. They are dry, they're not super pigmented, they blend super easily, but there is a lot of depth that's missing in this palette, as you guys can see. The deepest shade in here is this one here, and it's not even that deep. This is not a brown as it might appear on the screen. It is a corally orange color, and it's actually pretty light toned at that. You can build it up, but it isn't going to get very deep. I also think that in order to get any kind of pigmentation out of this palette, you do have to build them up, and that doesn't bode well for exacerbation of texture. I feel like it did exacerbate the texture on my eyes. The shimmers in this palette are gorgeous. That is what is on my lid space today, but they are so chunky. There are so many dual chromatic shades in here. I was so excited to use this palette. These shimmers are super chunky. They don't do you any favors on a textured eye, and they require a glitter glue to not fall out all over your face. And even then they still fall out all over your face, and even then they still fall into your eye. And I have actually myself experienced irritation with the glitters in this palette falling into my eye. And today is the first day that this eye is not super irritated by the glitters that fell out of this palette into my eye like 4 days ago. So that being said, I'm not sure that I'll use this palette again. Y'all know how I feel about glitters. But these shimmers are truly beautiful. I will also say that the wear time of the shimmers, as long as you're using a glitter glue, will last forever on your face. If you're not using a glitter glue, the shimmers kind of go onto your lid space and act more like toppers. There's definitely not any like baseline pigmentation to these. They don't have that wham bam feel that you're looking for in a shimmer when you're looking for glittery shimmers like this, unless you're using a glitter glue and you can build it up and you've got some kind of base color underneath it. Like today I have a base color underneath this. I did put that yellow underneath it so that these two shades would show up a little bit more yellow on top of a tacky glitter glue as well. Without the glitter glue, the shimmers aren't going to stick around. They're just not. Without a primer, your mattes aren't going to stick around. With a primer, the mattes are lasting about 3 or 4 hours before significant noticeable fading. So I'm not 100% sure that I think that this palette needs to stay in my collection as well. And that makes me super sad because I do love Juvia's Place. In addition to all of that, there are 9 eyeshadows in this 16 eyeshadow palette that are not suitable for eye use. 9. That means there are 7 in this palette that if you are a person who will not use an eyeshadow because it says the FDA has not approved it for eye use, you've only got 7 shades in here that you can use. And those 7 shades are these 6 here and that one right here. The rest of these shades, so this quad up here, this whole row, and this whole row down here are all not suitable for eye use. This does lack depth, and that is why I brought in this palette to pair with it, because I knew that this palette lacks depth. I mean, it's a palette that is full of pastels, but this palette ruined almost every single eye look that I did with this palette. So I'm going to swatch this for you. I probably am going to keep this palette in my collection for a smidge bit of time, but not for the mattes. It's for the shimmers. And then I go back and forth with that because I'm not a person that loves glitters. So will I actually ever pick up this palette again and use it after dealing with the irritation of my eye in person? Maybe not. But we're going to see. And if, next year when I do my palette declutter, is still a palette that I haven't picked back up or have no desire to pick back up, then it'll probably be decluttered then. My daughter would love to have this palette. So let's swatch these. There are 12 shadows in here, and of these 12 shadows, only 7 of those 12 shadows are mattes. And of those 7 matte eyeshadow palette, or of those 7 mattes that are in this eyeshadow palette, only one of them is supposedly okay for eye use. So, I mean, just to put it into perspective for you guys. I forgot to say, this is $25 as well. So this is a $25 eyeshadow palette with 16 pans of eyeshadow. This is a $25 eyeshadow palette with 9 pans of eyeshadow. The pans of eyeshadow in this one are 0.53 ounces per pan. The eyeshadows in this are 0.07 ounces per pan. Better bang for your buck, for sure. Much better quality, I feel like, for sure. Also, not spectacular. I have not turned on my audio at all, and I'm just realizing that, and I apologize. This is becoming a problem. Alright, so the first shade is this one here. It is called Daffodil, and it is a shimmery yellow, straight up yellow. Then we have Best Buds, which is also a shimmer, and it is a shimmer like tealy green to almost like silver. I feel like this one is very duochromy. Then we have Blooming, which is also a shimmer, and it is a shimmer lilac-y pink. And then we have Lilac You, and Lilac You is a matte lilac. Can you guys see it? Barely, right? Then we have Flower Petals, which is another shimmer, and it is kind of a lime green. Then we have Money Tree, which is another green. This one is a duochrome green to blue. I would almost say this is multi-chrome because it does also have a little bit of a gold kick to it. Then we have Peony, which is a matte pink. Then we have Purple Orchid, which is a shimmer like indigo purple blue. Sunshine is a shimmer yellow, straight up yellow, like butter yellow. It's so pretty. It is on my inner corner today. Then we have Lucky Clover, which is a matte mint. Then we have Blossom, which I'm going to put over here. Blossom is a duochrome peach to pink. And then we have Flower Child. This is a shimmer purple. Then we have Marigold, which is the matte yellow. Oh Honey, which is the matte corally brown. Then we have, I'm going to put this one over here. This is Gardenia. Gardenia was almost worthless in this palette. Definitely not any kind of pigmentation at all. And then we have Sweet Lilac, which I'm going to put over here. And that Sweet Lilac is also like a deeper lilac purple. Neither one of these palettes wanted to stick around. The shimmers though, oh my god, the shimmers are so beautiful. I just wish they were just a smidge bit less chunky. And that's what I remember from the Juvias Place formulas that I fell in love with eons ago, is they were these beautiful shimmers that weren't chunky, didn't fall out in your eyes, weren't glitter. And now I feel like that's all you're getting out of Juvia's Place. I'm not 100% sold on this palette, and at the end of the day, at the end of the year, it would probably rank in some of my worst of. Or maybe, if it's lucky, it would fall into that center area. So not super excited about either one of those palettes, if I'm honest with you. I loved some of the eye looks that I got out of the last couple weeks, but I also hated some of the eye looks that I got. I think that there's probably maybe 5 pictures that you're getting from eye looks, because even though I wore makeup probably 8 out of the 10, work days this last week, and definitely both days on the weekends because I film, I didn't have great eye looks that came from these palettes, and the biggest reason for that I feel like is this palette, which is why this one's being decluttered and this one's not at the moment. So with that said, I am going to go pull my next palette, so I will be right back. I haven't got much left in my collection to review, and what I do have left I feel like is kind of boring. And you guys see the looks that I come to video with time after time after time, and I think that you know what I mean by boring. Very monotone, very one-noted, very lack of color, very... So I think I am going to bring in 3 palettes this week. And there's a lot of shades between the 3 palettes, but I do think that it'll be a good mix because I'm bringing in this one, which is still sealed and I haven't used yet, but it is the Profusion Enchanted palette. And this is 21 eyeshadows, but these 21 eyeshadows are all satiny shimmers instead of, there's no mattes in this palette is where I'm going with that. So in that, I know that I need some mattes because I don't love all shimmer eye looks. I am going to also bring in 2 9-pan eyeshadow palettes to kind of partner with it. And in these 9-pan eyeshadow palettes, there are some shimmers. This one is by Complex Culture. This is the full-time eyeshadow palette. It's called the Party Edit. I got it in Nipsey eons ago. And even though there are some shimmers in this palette, they're different shimmers than what's in the Profusion palette. And there are more mattes. And these are a good baseline of matte shades. So you have kind of a red brown, a cool brown, a warm brown, and then like kind of this like camel brown. I feel like this is going to give me all the browns that I need to like bounce off of some of these like more earthy shades in that palette and give me like a little different shimmer vibe. And then I'm also bringing in the Morphe Petal Passion or 9P. This was given to me in gratis last FLC, and this has all the pinks and red mattes that I'm going to probably want to use, being is that it is February and kind of Valentine's season, but it also has some different shimmers in it as well than what appear in the Enchanted palette. So I do think it gives me a decent amount of depth and a decent amount of shades to dabble with. And ultimately, it's a lot of eyeshadow, but I do think over 2 weeks' time, I'm going to get a lot of usage out of them. I'm thinking through the lens of like Valentine's Day eye looks. I'm also thinking through the lens of a lot of like virtual training I have and doctor's appointments. I'm going to get a lot of eyeshadow use over the next 2 weeks, so I do think that I will be able to touch on every single one of these eyeshadows. So those are the 3 eyeshadow palettes that I'm going to come to you and review in a couple of weeks. I'm excited about this one. I haven't tried any eyeshadows from Complex Culture before, but I do have like a blush and bronzer palette from this brand. I also have some brushes from this brand. The lot that I've received in Ipsy from this brand that I absolutely love, so I'm really excited about that. And as much as this is Morphe is a brand I don't need in my collection, they don't have anything that I want, I did love the color story of this palette, so I'm actually kind of excited to try out this palette as well. With that said, if you guys have used any of those palettes, please let me know your thoughts. Please let me know what you think of the 2 palettes that I just reviewed, the Garden of Juvias by Juvia's Place and the Winky Lux Galaxy Kitten. Let me know what your thoughts are on those if you have them in your collection, if you've used them. And that's it. That's all I have for you today. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you and yours are safe and that you're healthy and that you're getting along as best you can in this wonderful world we're living in today. And I hope that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And I'm sorry about the audio. And until next time, bye friends.